Okay, so here what we are doing, we see a number of these as well when we look through the exam kit, is to somewhat compare one period to the next. So your aim is to sort of look at what's happening in one period and compare that to the next period of interest, and also to discuss, if you like, the external environment. So here we have a budget being prepared for the use of fuel, and fuel is used for in two situations. So fuel is used for production and fuel is also used for heating, right? So in a way, for these 10 marks, you want to be thinking, okay, let me talk about production, and let me also talk about heating, and let me also talk about the assumptions being made regarding these, what's happening in terms of this, what are the assumptions regarding pricing, what are the assumptions regarding usage. What we see, first of all, starting off with production, is we see an increase in the volume. So you want to highlight that increase in the volume, and technically that volume increase rate is 64,575 minus 63,000. And then you can do that as a percentage, of course, of the 63,000 because that's the original starting point. This is this year, this is next year. So, excuse me. So what we see here when you do this 575, this is 1575, and so the 1575 divided by 63,000. Let me just do that very quickly on my calculator. 0204 1575 divided by 63,000 is 0.025. That's 2.5%. So we see a volume increase. Remember, this is a budget, so they are assuming or planning for a 2.5% increase in volume of production. So ordinarily, you could write that ordinarily you're expecting. I suppose you would accept that if we're using fuel for production, there from here it seems, given this sort of scenario, it seems that fuel is a variable cost. So that is another assumption, that fuel is a variable cost, and it will increase, of course, with output. So really, ordinarily, we are expecting to use more fuel, if you like, for the next year, technically, in terms of more units of fuel. But further assumptions are telling us that they are installing some new machines. So currently, we see that we are using 750 liters per 1,000 units of production. So technically, you're using this figure here is 750 because if you're using 750 for 1,000, technically 1,000 from here, that's 63, isn't it? Times 63, and that's how you're going to get this answer here. So we can see that what they're actually assuming is a fall in the usage of fuel for these 1,000 liters, and that's another assumption, a key assumption, and you can discuss the fall. 750 to 600 is a fall of 150. 150 over 750 is 20%. So you see a 20% fall in the consumption of fuel, if you like, for every 1,000 units. So that's another key. That's another key assumption, and therefore, overall, you can go on to project if there is evidence for this. So the whole point is that it says are being installed. So I guess it's observing to see whether these savings are really happening in the end. When we come to look at performance measures, well, these are the sorts of things we'll be looking at to see whether or not we're really having those efficiencies. So then, of course, we can then focus on just insulation. So we can see heating in the workspace. I imagine this would be a fixed cost. So it means that we intend on, well, due to insulation, we believe that we will have another cost saving. So you can find the difference there again. So we see a fall of 7,800 minus 7,020, which is 780. And so therefore, that's a 10%, isn't it? It's a 10% fall in the heating costs is what we're also predicting. there in that point. So then, of course, another assumption is looking at the overall bigger picture, where we believe, or the argument is that fuel prices will have fluctuated between 48 and 79, although we've averaged 60p in terms of due to these fluctuations, but they want to budget at 72, which seems a bit not very prudent, because technically you've been doing it at 60p on average, so 72 is quite a distance. So you can find that, you can do that as a percentage as well. There's an increase in the assumption here of 12p, isn't there? That's 12p on the 60p. That's an increase of 20% on fuel costs. So these are the assumptions that we are highlighting. So we see an increase of 20% more than the actual average price. So when you see this question, which you will see, talking about draft budgets, your aim is to literally compare one period to the next and discuss. Cool, great stuff. So that is part A. And those are the key planning assumptions. That's part A. Yeah, I'm going to stay on this page. I was going to go to the next page, but the next page means I won't see the initial information on. They're just blank pages for you to do some writing. So they want why planning assumptions are not totally within the control of management. For me, the one that jumps out the most is that gas and oil and fuel are, if you like, regulated, or when I say regulated, sorry, forgive me, are determined on the global market. So prices are entirely outside the control of of the um, of the parties. Things can change. So unless they are buying these um, commodity commodities at a fixed price now, to ensure that they're not affected by future changes in the price. That's the first thing. So we're talking about world energy prices. The second thing is usually, is like you and I know, there's the issue of the weather. So the intention is that it could get colder, and in the end, you actually end up burning more fuel, if you like, and that's the I think another important factor. So I would sort of say, it's not letting me write here. I'll sort of say the weather, global prices, which are actually outside our sort of influence, if you like, I think is another one. I think the other thing here, of course, as usual, is this is just a budget, because you can actually have a change in demand, in actual demand for the product, and as a result, you will need to buy more fuel, and that's something you have to think about. So if you have a change in demand, either a fall in demand, or for whatever reason, quantity, either change in quantity demanded due to changes in pricing, or actually just a general change in demand, if you like, maybe just greater income or substitution for oil, whatever, for this type of fuel, then you will have, and that can change and affect, and that's just outside your control. Um, I think that's sort of those are some of the main points. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that there will always be other inefficiencies, that, if you like, that other parts of the business, are outside the control. So sometimes we talk about heating in the workplace. Sometimes people just want to put the heaters on. There are just certain costs that are outside your control. You can budget as much as you want to, but especially here, total for heating, um, you can have other inefficiencies. So people leaving the windows open and leaving the heating on. It'll be difficult to blame them for that, because these are errors that people who actually are in the workspace are committing. But I think the three big ones, of course, are the global prices, the weather, the change in actual demand for production, and other inefficiencies of other parties that management can't quite get their hands on, or can't be in control of all the time. I think that answers B. I think that answers B. And finally, C, I guess this is a good question. Performance measures that can be reported to help keep fuels within. Fuel is very important, fuel costs. So I suppose you want to have, if you like, a register or tracking, given that fuel seems to fluctuate a lot. Having some kind of regular update on the purchase pricing of fuel, the purchase prices of fuel, you want to sort of be very aware of that. so that if you need to either buy long or set contracts so that you're not having to pay for fuel um, at the going market price, at the spot price, so you can sort of try and get some sort of fixed price. That's one thing. So you won't actually be monitoring the cost of fuel. The other thing I suppose you want to do is to manage, to look at the usage of fuel, the usage, but a regular usage of fuel. So I would probably say weekly usage of fuel. Um, based on, if you like, this consumption of fuel on a regular basis. So really looking at the amount of that. I suppose another thing is looking at the efficiency of that usage. So how many liters are being used? It says here you're using this 750 per thousand units. Can this be more efficient? Can we be using, I don't know, 500 liters for a thousand units? What are those issues? So trying to understand what's going on there. And of course, if you're aware of the weekly production that's taking place, or the monthly, I would say weekly production of goods, this, because it's a variable cost, this weekly production is connected to, of course, to the amount of fuel being used. So I think there's the question of productivity. How well is that fuel being used to generate those units, which is trying to reduce the amount of fuel per thousand units, of course. Um, that's the first thing. Again, the price of fuel. Can we get better deals? What's happening with that average? I think is an important point. Um, and yeah, just regular consumption every week, if you like, and regular wastage, just trying to see, maybe having a register of the wastage, looking at wastage, what is the weekly wastage of fuel, and sort of understanding what's taking place there. Good, great stuff. And I think those are all fair answers for that in terms of, but this is important to practice this because it's the kind of thing that can come. We can see it. We know we've done this, of course, in the exam kit. It's important to keep working on it. Okay.